What's going on, guys? It's Tron Ninja here, coming at you on how to use and how to counter series episode 1. In this episode, we're going to be covering the Oppressor Mk2. Quickly before we get on to the video though, if you could give me a like, subscribe, hit the bell, and make sure to share with your friends, and also go check out the eye at the top right of the screen so you don't miss out on previous content I've made on GTA 5 and other games. That would be much appreciated. Also, I apologize for how long this video actually is, but generally, because of the fact on how much this bike actually has history and how much it's actually affected and griefed the whole community for 4 to 5 years straight, I think this video being this long is warranted, so then you can actually know how to counter it effectively and know which vehicles are completely ineffective against it. Special thanks to Green Ninja King and the Prime Simon on YouTube for helping me record all of the recordings for this video. Their links to their channels and their social media will be in the description below. Go show them some loves because they actually helped me grab all the recording footage necessary for this video. The Oppressor Mk2 was added back in 2018 during the nightclub update or the after hours update, and ever since then, this vehicle has terrorized the streets of Los Santos for years. In this video, we're going to be actually covering how to actually fully counter it, its stats, and what the Criminal Enterprise's nerf actually affected. All of its speed, all of its missile stats, and all of its countermeasure stats, all in one video before the testing. Before the Criminal Enterprise nerf, this vehicle used to actually terrorize everything. It used to destroy almost every normal car, every normal bike. It used to counter almost every single helicopter besides the higher top tier ones. And the jets had to be extremely careful around this, so practically this was like the jack of all trades vehicle. There was literally no other reason to purchase any other vehicle in the game when this thing existed. So for this reason, the nerf was extremely necessary back in the Criminal Enterprise's update. And in this video, we're going to actually gauge and see how much the nerf has affected it over time. And to see just drastically how different this bike is from its predecessor before the actual Enterprise update. But firstly, we're going to talk about what you need to do if you want to actually buy this thing, and I'm also going to explain if you should actually buy this thing. First off, you're going to need a nightclub, and then you're going to need a terabyte. I'm not going to be listing the prices down below, but I will say right now, with its new price as of the passing of April 27th, especially when you see in the info, this is a very pricey vehicle, so I highly recommend you go over all the stats that I'm going to be showing in the video to see if you actually want this thing, because the price has drastically changed. It's quite a pricey vehicle now. Once you have your nightclub, make sure you get your terabyte with the specialized workshop to be able to customize the Mk2. Without this, you will not be able to put the missiles on it, or the countermeasures, or the other weapons on it. So make sure you get that as well, and then you can actually go into the rest of it. Also, disclaimer before we get into the actual test footage, I want to preface right now that me, Simon, and Green in all of these testing clips while flying the Mk2 actually know how to use this thing effectively. Me and Green know how to fly it upside down. Me and Green know how to generally use this thing against ground targets. And I would say Simon, Green, and I are pretty good at flying it normally with the homing missiles. So keep this in mind. We are not noob Mk2 pilots. We actually know what we're doing. This is to properly gauge how effective an actual vehicle is against an actual good Oppressor Mk2 user, so then we can actually properly gauge if a vehicle is actually a good counter or not. Any vehicle can be a good counter against a bad pilot. It's if it's a good counter against a good pilot that should matter. Now we're going to be quickly going over into how to use and grind with it for the people that are looking to buy this thing right off the get-go, so you actually know how effective it is for missions and jobs. Then we'll move into the testing and how to counter it. These next two clips are going to be two different types of jobs at 4 times speed. First is the client job robbery in progress with the Oppressor Mk2. Generally, I'm just going to be checking the 3 banks that this job has a possibility of spawning at, and then I just simply lock onto the actual AI if it's at that bank, and then I know it's there. Then I just shoot the missiles at the general targets, and then I go in and pick up the package. If the package was outside, I could literally just park this thing on the ground and then drive over on top of it and then just pick it up instantly. It's very good for getting into tight areas as well, but do keep in mind that it has a hard time hitting specific vehicles like helicopters and stuff when it has a low hitbox, or vehicles moving it at speed when shooting from behind it. So keep this in mind, but generally it's pretty good at picking stuff up and getting things to the delivery point. It's also a pretty good defensive vehicle with the countermeasures, so for this reason it's very good for grinding, but just know that because of the 5-minute cooldown that I'll go over later, if this thing gets destroyed, this is this thing's biggest detriment. Because it's more of a defensive vehicle now, if a griefer randomly blows up your Mark II while you're doing a job, you're not going to be able to use it for 5 minutes. As you can see in the headhunter clip here, it's killing a lot of the car targets pretty easily, but that's because the targets aren't moving very fast. So if they're stopped, the missiles shouldn't have really that much problem, or if they're moving slow. But if one missile hits and they start running off, your missiles are probably going to have a harder time. In these next few clips, this is going to be how to use or how to PvP with this thing. Basically, the synopsis is that you want to shoot missiles behind everything when you're attacking it, like a normal car or a helicopter in this next clip, because generally, from what I've noticed with the testing in this video, a lot of the vehicles that I'm shooting at in these clips have a hard time actually dodging missiles from this thing when they're coming from behind it. But if the missiles are facing the target and the target's coming towards the missiles, it has absolutely no chance. Here in this clip, I'm actually attempting to kill my friend on the ground by arcing my missiles. This is probably the most effective way to use this thing in PvP now, because the missile tracking just makes it not very good against vehicles. So if anything, this is more of a spawn trap type of vehicle now, if anything, similar to the jetpack in a way. But generally, it's not that hard to counter, especially if you're in auto aim, because there's a counter later on at the end of the video that I'll go over that can completely decimate this thing. One thing I did want to go over before we go into the basic info and the stats of the Oppressor Mk2 along with its nerfs, I do want to mention one thing. You should be only using chaff if you want to actually fly this thing correctly. In order to use chaff correctly, you want to pop it before you hear the ding sound of the homing launcher. If you hear it before you pop it, that means that the missile's already going to be launching towards you. You want to pop it before you hear this, so then that way you can actually disable their lock-on. Using smoke and flares are completely ineffective because flares cannot actually deal with spammable missile vehicles like the Deluxo with missiles that are actually a threat to the Oppressor Mk2. So generally, over time, those missiles will just overpower the flares, and smoke doesn't actually do anything to the actual missiles, so it's completely useless. So if you want to fly this thing correctly and have the most protections with countermeasures, only use chaff. Quickly before we move on to the actual gameplay and demonstrate how much the nerf is actually done, I want to go over the general info on the Oppressor Mk2 and both versions that most people use. We're mostly going to be covering the missile version in this video, and most of the nerfs mostly pertain to this version anyways, but I did leave some of the cannon information on the right of the image, as you can see. The missile tracking on the missile version is meh, subpar now. As you'll see when I show the Toreador gameplay and demonstrate how bad the missiles actually are in other types of testing, you'll see what I mean when I say subpar or meh. The lock-on range is 300 meters, which is like B11 strikeforce type homing missiles, and it travels up to 540 meters, which, you know, that sounds like a lot, but with all these nerfs now, it's not really that much. The missile fire rate is still insane though, at 60 RPM, so definitely watch out for that. Sometimes the rapid fire missiles can even catch me off guard. It holds 20 missiles, so this is definitely something that has not changed, but I don't really see much problem with it. The max range of the cannon is 150 meters, and its cannon fire rate is 120 RPM. Not really that bad, especially when you consider it only requires 2 shots regardless of how much you are in the blast radius when you get shot, and its blast radius value is at 1.5. And as I said before, it does not matter where a player gets hit by the explosion. As long as they get hit, they're getting the same damage regardless if they're outside of the explosion or they're in the center of it. The damage is the same. And the ammo capacity for the cannon is unlimited. I've used this thing literally for hours killing people, so I never actually run out. But it was hinted at when this thing first came out, it was supposed to be 750 rounds, which is just not a true. I've used this thing for over like 3 hours sometimes, and it's never run out. And the countermeasures, this is a big one. The countermeasures before and after the nerf. So we're going to talk about flares first. The capacity before the nerf was 20, and you could use flares every 3 seconds. And every time you used flares, only 2 flares would come out, unlike the planes which shot out 4. And after the nerf, you could only have 10 flares, and you could only use them every 10 seconds, which is a huge difference, but not as much as the chaff, which is the most used countermeasure. Before the nerf, the capacity was 10, and it was 10 seconds a cooldown, and you had 4 seconds of vulnerability, and I believe you had 6 seconds of basically not being able to be locked onto. But after the nerf, this is the big part, you lose almost 5 more capacity, so you're only at 5 chaff now. You have to wait 20 seconds to be able to use it again, and unlike the 4 seconds of vulnerability on the before, this one has 14 seconds of vulnerability, meaning those higher tracking missile vehicles will almost 100% kill Mark 2 if they're being too aggressive, if they're being too close or anything like that. So definitely a thing. And these next things on the other side of the bottom of the chart, these are the most important things. The top speed without RB, so this is basically if you're not holding RB and you're just flying it normally with the wings out, is 108 miles per hour. With holding RB, that's 130 to 132. This one's kind of up in the air. I've sometimes even able to get 135, so it's kind of spotty. And this is the part where you need to really consider, is this bike worth purchasing if you're thinking about buying this bike. The non-trade price before April 27th is $3.890 to $50. That is a lot of money for one bike that has been nerfed extensively over the years. And the reason why it says April 27th or before it is because as of the making of this video right now, it might be after April 27th, or it might be just before when this video gets uploaded. Once it hits April 27th, as you can see on the right here, it's going to cost $8 million non-trade price. And non-trade price is basically if you don't complete the client jobs to get the trade price. You're paying the more expensive version. This bike costs as much as a fucking yacht. That is ridiculous. And this is the biggest thing, the spawn in or destroy cooldown. This was added back in the casino heist update. Basically, if you spawn in a bike through your MC menu, your terabyte menu, or your mechanic, you have to wait 5 minutes. If it's destroyed by you dropping it in water, you blowing it up, or another player blowing it up, it's 5 minutes each. And what that means is that every time your bike is destroyed, no matter if you did it or somebody else, every time it's destroyed, the 5-minute start. Meaning that if there was a 5-minute timer before the new one even started, basically, once it's destroyed again, the 5 minutes restart. So, this is a big thing to keep in mind when fighting Mark IIs. Always blow up the bike. If you blow up the bike, they can't use it through their menus for 5 minutes. If you keep destroying it, it's going to make them not be able to use it as often. Which is huge considering that we've just went over all the countermeasure nerfs, the tracking, which we'll go over in the gameplay, and the subpart or kind of details that I'm going over right now. This bike really isn't meta anymore, as I'm going to show later on. Now we're going to be heading on into the head-on missile test. This test is basically going to have my friend coming at me in an Oppressor Mk2 while I sit still using the missiles. As you guys can see clearly in the gameplay, the missiles are having a very hard time hitting anything coming at it from a far distance. This is generally normal for most missiles. Most missiles have a hard time hitting things coming straight at them. But the one thing that I did notice is that when he was getting closer, they still were missing even at such a high angle, and it's only when he was just about to pass me and gets behind me that this final missile actually kills me. This is just one example of many on how much they've nerfed these missiles. I would have killed him much sooner by now if they were the same missiles before the nerf. Now we're going to be doing the up-close missile tick test. Basically, this test is going to consist of 3 different ticks. As you can see on the airstrip here, there are 3 lights in front of my Nightshark. This is tick number 1. As you can see, the missiles are completely missing. They're not even making an attempt to hit me at all, even if I move back in the clip, as you can see. But when I move on to the next 3 sets of lights called tick 2, it actually starts getting more accurate and has more of a chance of hitting. Even when I back up, it still will kind of hit. Sometimes it did miss in the recordings at tick 2 at those further distances. And then at tick 3, it always hit. So basically, the assumption is that when you're at tick 3, you're basically hitting all the time. But if you can't hit anything at tick 1, then the missile tracking is much worse. These next vehicle tests are going to be basically asking the question, can a vehicle actually dodge all the rockets from behind when a Mark II is chasing them? Generally speaking, the answer is no. No, it can't. As you can see, his Oppressor Mk2 got completely decimated, and as you can see in the Nightshark here, it's still even hitting me even though it's armored. It's only when, as you'll see in the gameplay in a few minutes here, when I actually turn around and start facing him that the missiles actually start missing. This next test is the same as the head-on test from before, except this time this is the Toreador. As you can see, it can completely decimate it. This is generally to show what the missiles were like before the nerf, because the Stromberg and the Toreador share the same missiles as the pre-patched Oppressor Mk2 before anything happened to it. As you can see, it has much higher of chances of hitting a broomstick coming towards it, and I actually got him hit twice by 2 missiles here. So, definitely a vast difference here, and here with the Nightshark, we're on tick 1, and the missiles are hitting us, like, completely. the missiles are not missing at all. They're just immediately turning towards the Nightshark. And that means that tick 2 and 3 also are also getting hit, which also just proves my statement before. If any missile cannot hit anything at tick 1 or 2, the tracking is worse. And if you can hit it tick 3, it's regardless. And this is just to show how ridiculous the missile tracking is. I went full speed at my friend in my Toreador in a Nightshark, and the missile still hit even though it launched like 3 inches from me when I passed him. Quickly before we go on to the actual counter categories of classes of vehicles, I want to go over the speed increase. So basically with the helicopters, there's going to be a no speed increase test and a speed increase test. Basically what the speed increase glitch is basically you have to have a personal helicopter like this Buzzard here that I took from my hangar, and you have to actually take it out of the actual hangar physically. You cannot call it from the interaction menu. This first test is without the speed increase, just to show you how actually slow this thing actually is without it, and then the next test will actually show how fast it is with it. Generally speaking, when it got to one side of the map to the other, it was generally a 20-second difference between all the different helicopters, so it wasn't that different in actual top speed. However, if there was one thing that I did notice was that some helicopters actually gained altitude much higher than others, especially the Savage, as you'll see in these next few clips. And the other thing is that their acceleration is almost on par with jets, so because of this, all you have to do to outrun homing missiles from Oppressor Mk2s using the speed increase is basically do what the planes do. Go at top speed with the speed increase, and then hold LB or RB simultaneously for a few seconds. When you do this, for some reason, the missiles cannot catch you when you're turning and going at top speed. This is a weird behavioral bug with the missiles for some reason, and because of this, a lot of helicopters with the speed increase can outrun a lot of the missiles, meaning you can waste almost 90% of the Mark II's actual ammunition while it's chasing after you, making it a whole lot easier for you actually to kill him. As you can see here, the Savage, without the speed increase, it's a very slow chopper. It's taking a very long time to get across the map, but as you'll see with the speed increase, it's going to be like almost twice as high in the next test. And generally, the Savage without the speed increase is probably the most vulnerable helicopter in the entire game. I know it's kind of embarrassing that a chopper with an explosive cannon and homing missiles has to run away from a target, especially considering its name, but that's really the only way you can use this thing because it doesn't have its low hitbox anymore. One thing I will mention with the Savage is that you need to watch out for two things. Number one, as you can probably see in the gameplay, with the speed increase, the nose likes to point up a lot. And because the nose likes to point up a lot, it gains a lot more altitude even than the Hunter in some cases when it's going forward in this momentum. The second thing is that all speed increase helicopters, you need to really watch the descent when you're going down towards the ground. Especially with the Savage, this thing basically feels like a train with no brakes, and it just refuses to stop. It will not stop at all, and it will go extremely fast. And when you're going at that type of speed in a helicopter, you can't really control it. Here in the Hunter, this is the fastest helicopter in the game besides the Akula. It's already out of the city within a few seconds of me talking. But generally, again, with like the Savage and the Buzzard, you're going to see a giant altitude difference. And you're going to see a giant time difference and all that other stuff. So when I mention the speed increase method, it's basically the helicopter attempting to run away from the actual missiles. That is the whole point of this whole thing. If a helicopter can outrun the missiles, the Mark II is basically ammo-less at that point because all it takes is for them to waste 20 missiles chasing you that will never hit you because you're going super fast, and then you can turn around and go on the offensive. Or, if you're in a really good chopper like the Hunter here, you can spice it up with your countermeasures, go on a head-on actual engagement, which is the other test, and then you can go on the runaway again. Quickly on the head-away thing, or the head-on engagement, The head-on engagement test in the helicopter category is when the helicopter is going to be hovering in place and not doing the speed increase. Here in this test, this is to test to see how fast a hunter with speed increase is compared to a Hydra. The Hydra didn't catch me at all. It stayed completely behind the hunter, meaning that if the Hydra was in front of the hunter would not catch the Hydra. What does that mean? That means that basically the hunter with the speed increase, it has the same top speed performance and overall acceleration as a Hydra, meaning that it's just as fast as some of the most powerful jets in the game. The first helicopter up to bat is the Annihilator. First, there's going to be 2 clip tests of the head-on test when I'm going to be fighting it and hovering in place, and then it's going to be the speed increase method or the runaway method. So yeah, as you can see, the Annihilator in its head-on test with the Oppressor Mk2, a large portion of the missiles that Simon was shooting at me were completely missing because of the low hitbox that the Annihilator has. And your best weapon when you're facing Oppressor Mk2 in an Annihilator or a big chopper like this is to wait for them to get close and then hit them with your propellers. You can try hitting them with your machine guns, but they simply move too fast. In the second head-on test, as you can clearly see, the low hitbox was helping once again, but as you can also see, at certain angles, the missiles can still hit the Annihilator by going down and then going up once through the hitbox. And generally, without hitting the propellers with the Mk2, there's really no chance of this thing beating the Mk2 head-on, so it's much better to do the runaway method. With the low hitbox, it's pretty obvious at this point that all missiles are pretty much ineffective when shooting from behind an Annihilator, especially how the missiles completely interact with the actual hitbox of this chopper. Most of them completely pass underneath it, not blowing it up. There were a few missiles that completely went off and did their own thing, but generally you're pretty safe from this, so just waste all their missiles, and then once they stop shooting missiles at you, you can go on the offensive. This is also one of the rare few choppers in this game that doesn't actually need the speed increase from the hangar in order to do this. You just generally just need to fly one. This is the main reason why I wanted to show off the runaway method a second time. The Annihilator can be fast with the speed increase, but it's still a very slow chopper. It's almost as slow as the Savage, and as you can see, if the Mk2 gets up close to the Annihilator and it arcs its missiles, the Annihilator stands no chance. Now we're going to be moving on to the Havok with the same 4 tests. This helicopter has countermeasures and a machine gun and no low hitbox. This chopper also requires the speed increase from the hangar in order to do the runaway method. As you can see, even though the Havok didn't have a low hitbox with its chaff and its small size, it was actually dodging a lot of Simon's missiles pretty easily. And as you could also see, because of its centered machine gun and good handling, it was actually able to line up its machine gun against Simon quite a few times, and actually where I had my machine gun on him for quite a while, like right here, he said he nearly died from the machine gun here. So I actually would have got him here if he didn't hit me with the missile afterwards. As you guys can see, after he wasted all of his missiles, I followed him to the ground, waited for him to land, and then I actually killed him with the gas can, and then it blew up and it actually killed him. So yeah, you can actually kill a lot of Mark II pilots, but you have to waste a lot of their missiles and wait for them to land. And then after you kill them, then you can focus your time on actually blowing up the bike with a machine gun. It can counter it, but most of the time, it's just better just to waste the missiles with the helicopter instead of actually trying to kill it. Not to mention, unlike other helicopters, this actually requires skill to be able to use the machine guns. One thing to keep in mind while doing the runaway method with the top speed increase from the hangar is that this chopper, if you turn it too much with LB or RB, it'll completely turn around. And it's also one of these choppers that for some reason like to go downward when it's going forward for some reason. So watch out for this. Luckily, in this next top speed test with the speed increase from the hangar, I was actually able to do it somewhat, but there is a few things that you need to watch out for. Number one, if he wastes all his missiles, he's going to be trying to run away to a terabyte or the road, so then he can spawn another one. But luckily, you'll have the speed increase to catch up to him and chop him up with your helicopter blades, because there's no way you're going to kill him with the machine guns. And the other thing is that you need to actually watch out sometimes when you're trying to turn from an object like a mountain or something. So make sure you use your chaff to be able to disable his lock-on while you're trying to readjust your turning. Because as you can see here, when I'm coming up to this mountain here, I overshot this turn too much and I went towards the mountain. I didn't pop chaff, and one of his missiles was able to catch up to me and kill me. Now we're going to be moving on to the Annihilator stealth with barrage missiles suited out on its kit. The number one thing that you need to be aware of with the Annihilator stealth is that it doesn't have homing missiles. Because of this, it's going to be extremely hard to connect the missiles, and because of its big bulkiness, it's going to be hard to dodge missiles when it's constantly surrounding you. But for the most part, I was able to dodge most of them, So as long as you're actually paying attention to him, you should be fine. However, if you do equip homing missiles, unlike me where I have barrage, you should be able to win a head-on fight most of the time. Here we're doing the speed increase method at 4 times speed. Because of how fast the Annihilator actually is, we actually had to go all the way up to the LMOC for him to actually be able to catch me. Unfortunately, this is again one of those choppers where if you're holding LB or RB too much during the turn, it's going to completely turn around and shoot it upward like this, and completely destroy you. Also, another thing to keep in mind, even though despite it may have a low hitbox, it's actually almost twice as ineffective as the normal Annihilators. So if anything, you want to try and avoid relying on it because it just doesn't do much from what I've seen. And here's another top speed test again. Here's another showcase of what happens when you press LB or RB too much. The whole helicopter turns around way too much, and if you try to adjust it, it shoots up, and then, yeah, you die. Now we're going to be moving on to the Buzzard attack chopper, both the hanger one that you can put inside your hanger through Pegasus, and the CEO version that is the black one I'll show clips of later. Here's the first clip. As you can clearly see when we start the engagement, yeah, the Buzzard destroys it. There wasn't really any much competition, especially considering that Simon was going to shoot, but then he realized he was running into a fence. Here's test number 2 near the communications tower. As you can see right here, the missiles are completely not even trying, and they're launching pretty close at pretty steep angles. Another thing is that the Buzzard, for some unknown reason, can actually lock onto things lower than it much more than any other chopper. And because of the way the missiles launch from the side pods rather than the Sparrow, for example, the uncentered nature of the missiles is actually what catches a Mark II pilot with its very rigid flight pattern off guard. Basically, in this clip, he was flying upward, the left missile pod shot out a missile, he wasn't expecting it because the missile clipped through my front of my chopper and completely destroyed him. He wasn't expecting it. So, one thing to keep in mind is that because the missile pods are not centered, it actually completely catches the Mark II off guard. And the low hitbox on this thing is very effective from what I've seen. So, definitely watch out for this. So from the testing that I've gathered from this video, you don't really need the speed increase at all. The CEO one or the one that you spawn through the interaction menu from your hangar, it doesn't really matter what version it is always going to be able to kill the Mark II from what I've seen. And as you can see, this is a perfect demonstration of just how good the Buzzard's low hitbox is. There's like almost 10 missiles being shot behind me, and almost all 10 of them completely miss. And then I think it's the 11th or 12th when he actually gets above me and actually blows up me and him that actually connects. So, a very, very good low hitbox. And because of its good low hitbox, it makes even some of the good dodging techniques for the homing launcher very useful here. And that's not even to mention the fact that passengers can use flare guns to divert missiles along with its low hitbox, and if you have the speed increased one from the hangar like my red one, you can even have more advantages. So this is a very good chopper. And as you can also see, this is the black CEO Buzzard that you can spawn right next to you for missions and stuff. And you can see that it's just as easily beating the Mark II as my personal one. In fact, there's not really even a reason to own a personal one based off of the performance of the CEO one, as you're seeing. It's so easy for this thing to dodge the missiles that I'm not even trying. I'm just paying attention to where his position is, and then I'm directing my helicopter accordingly to the missiles. And because of this, you can just pull out a Buzzard and just destroy him. And then eventually, when he starts wasting missiles too much, or if he gets too close, or he gets at a bad angle, as you can see here, he's going to be able to die very easily. As I said before, the flight pattern of the broomstick is predictable. It's straight lines, and as long as you predict that straight line by going up in a diagonal, because Oppressor Mk2s have to go up in diagonals, it is very easy to completely intercept a Mark II here. The most shocking part for me in this test with the Buzzard was the fact that the Buzzard, out of all of the helicopters that I'm testing in this video, this one actually got the highest kill count on Mark IIs. So I highly recommend using this chopper. Moving on next, we have the FH-1 Hunter, the jack of all trades helicopter. This helicopter has everything that you would ever want: a 7-missile barrage system, homing missiles, a Valkyrie cannon, bombs, countermeasures, and 3-missile armor. This is the best chopper in the game for your buck. In the head-on test, you don't actually need speed increase, but it does actually help gain a lot more altitude against the broomstick when you're actually fighting it. But the one thing to keep in mind is because of the general size of the Hunter and its helicopter blades, hitting a broomstick with your helicopter blades is actually pretty easy, as you can see in the first test. Then the second test here, he came at me, we kind of did an exchange. He shot me twice with his missiles, but he didn't blow me up because of the armor. And generally I was using my chaff the whole time, so he couldn't actually get a lock. And one thing to keep in mind is that if he's flying in front of you or close to you, use the barrage missiles and then combine it with the homing missiles. We'll talk about the Valkyrie cannon in a little bit with this chopper in a separate test, but generally you don't need speed increase. You can just fly this thing pretty much vanilla on its own, and as long as you're decent at flying it and pop chaff, you should be completely fine, as you can see right here. This next test is the top speed test, but with a little bit of a variation of a head-on test. This is actually one of the rare few choppers in this game that actually have homing missiles and countermeasures. So because of this, you can pop chaff, go towards him, shoot a bunch of missiles, and then you can do the top speed method and outrun all his missiles. Generally, you do need top speed method from the hangar increase in order to be able to do this, but I have been able to do it without the increase from the hangar, but it's just more safer just to go back to your hangar and then get the speed increase from your hangar then. That way, you can actually play a lot more aggressively. As you can see here, I'm about to pop chaff, and I'm about to lock onto homing again. And he won't be able to lock onto me at all, and because of how fast the Hunter is with speed increase, which is basically the same speed as a Hydra, I can completely outturn and outspeed his missiles, and when I'm using chaff and I'm going up close aggressive with him, he can't really do much against me anyways. Because of this, the Hunter completely outclasses the Oppressor Mk2 missiles and its overall flight pattern and so on. So generally, this is the best way to completely destroy an Oppressor Mk2. Combinate the head-on method with the top speed method only because of its chaff though. If you don't have chaff, don't do this. But then again, I don't see why you wouldn't be running chaff with this. And basically, he just gave up. He just gave up and he gave me the kill because he just saw no point in wasting any more missiles on me. This next test is basically the same thing as the last clip, but this time we actually have the gunner inside the Valkyrie cannon of the Hunter. Basically, the reason why I wanted to separate this from the other tests is because of the fact that when you have the cannon, the Hunter becomes twice as deadly because now you have a gunner shooting a free aim high explosive cannon with the ability to actually aim it, unlike bumper aiming with the chopper as I am with the missiles. And then I can combine it with my chaff and my barrage and homing missiles. This makes a deadly combo, but do keep in mind the reason why we don't actually end up destroying the Oppressor Mk2 is because of the fact that Green is actually flying the Oppressor Mk2 and Simon is on the gun. And Green is generally a much better Oppressor Mk2 pilot than Simon or even me. So because of that fact, it was a lot harder for me and Simon to actually line up shots. And for some reason, the gods just bless him with the absolute luck, because he just is able to even lock on to us, as you can see when I'm popping chaff and stuff. So don't really know what's up with that, but generally the Cannon Hunter is probably your best chopper to pull against, unless if your opponent on the broomstick is actually very good, like Green here. And this next test is the second attempt at me, Simon, trying to kill him with the Hunter gun, the barrage missiles, and the homing all in one package. But unfortunately, as you're about to see after this 4 times increased speed clip, We completely failed once again because Green is just 10 times superior at flying this bike than anybody else that I've ever actually seen. Even when I'm completely flying it correctly, as you're going to see, sometimes when I'm popping chaff, he's just able to lock on for some reason. So as I said before, he just has the luck of the gods apparently, and I can't really do much against him. This last test with the head-on and top speed method tests, along with the Valkyrie gunner on top, basically this one was actually able to get a kill, but this time it was because Simon was on the Oppressor Mk2 and Green was on the machine gun. The next helicopter up to bat is the Akula stealth helicopter. This one is generally the fastest chopper in the game, with good homing missiles but no countermeasures, but as you're about to see in the actual tests, it doesn't really need the countermeasures. There was only really an Akula clip that was worth showing, and that was the top speed method, because generally you don't really need to fight aggressively with an Akula in the first place. As you can see, because of the speed increase, the Akula is insanely fast, outrunning missiles from an Oppressor that was actually not that far behind it, and it is easily outrunning the missiles. And because I said it doesn't need chaff, I literally meant it. That's how fast this thing goes when it's in speed increase from the hangar and you take it out of the hangar. As you're about to see, I'm about to approach it aggressively, shooting homing missiles at it, and I'm about to completely pass him like a jet, and he's not going to be able to turn around in time and launch a missile close enough so that it can catch up to me, as you can see right here. And then when I do the second turnaround, the missile actually connects and kills him, and all his missiles completely miss because of how fast I'm going towards them. This is a very effective chopper, probably the second best chopper to use. The next helicopter on the chopping block is the Sparrow from the submarine that you can store and put countermeasures on it and spammable missiles. This one is okay, but generally speaking, because of its centered missiles, unlike the Buzzard, it has a harder time actually connecting with the Oppressor Mk2 and its missiles overall. But the reason why it's still up here in the topper echelon is because of its chaff and its small size. It makes it extremely hard for a broomstick to actually hit this thing when it's using its chaff consistently. And the other thing is that this chopper actually had the second highest amount of kills. The Hunter and the Akula were just underneath of that. So even though the clips show that the Sparrow is losing a large portion of the time, this is mainly to show you what not to do when you're facing an Oppressor Mk2 in your Sparrow, because I see a lot of people actually using the Sparrow, and I want to show them exactly what they're doing wrong. Also, ever since last summer's update, the Criminal Enterprise update, when they added countermeasures to this chopper, for some unknown reason, has infinite countermeasures, meaning it can use chaff infinite amounts of times. And the other thing is that this is one of those choppers, when doing the top speed method, it can't actually, hold LB or RB for too long, otherwise it'll turn and do that jump thing that the Stealth Annihilator and the Havok were doing. That's the main problem with it. And yes, this thing can do the speed increase because Rockstar is Rockstar, and they didn't test this thing when they decided to store it inside of the submarine, so it actually does have a speed increase. But it's also, the other problem with the speed increase, as you're going to see in these later clips, it is also like the Havok. It likes to drop a lot when it's going super fast. So make sure you gain some altitude before you attempt to actually do the top speed method. By using your countermeasures, go aggressive for a bit, and then once you're a little bit high, then you can actually attempt the top speed method to outrun their missiles. Generally, it's a very good chopper, but it's not as good as the Buzzard. Now we're moving on to a special case, the thruster jetpack. This one is a very special case because unlike other helicopters, this actually has a very unique feature, which we'll get into in a minute. This one has 2 missiles with a standard cooldown like the Barrage, or the Buzzard missiles, I mean. And it has slower missiles from what I've seen, but some other people say they look faster. It has chaff, and it has pretty nimble handling along with a slide in motion thing where if you hold LB or RB and then use the left analog stick for direction, you can actually turn a lot faster for strafing and stuff. But generally, in the head-on test, as you can see here, it's not very good because of that low hitbox, or that weird hitbox, I mean. The weird hitbox basically is where if a missile hits behind the thruster for some inconspicuous reason, it blows up behind the thruster, but it doesn't do any damage to it. In some instances, as you could just see right there, it was okay doing a head-on test, but in other ones where the missile curves around and hits the back of the thruster, and the thruster isn't moving very fast, the pilot will die, but the aircraft will not for some reason. So generally, you want to avoid using the thruster in a head-on engagement because of its weird hitbox and how the missiles collide with it and stuff. It's just super buggy. However, using that same weird hitbox running away is actually this thing's greatest advantage. So as I said before, if a missile hits the behind of the thruster where that hitbox actually is, the missile is incapable of actually blowing up the aircraft or killing the player inside the thruster for some unknown reason, as you're about to see in the gameplay here. Meaning that this is probably the safest hovercraft / helicopter in this game to do the top speed or runaway method. Because it has chaff, so it can turn around and be aggressive, just like the Hunter, and then it can run away and blow up all the missiles and waste all of the Mark II's time. Basically meaning that this is another good one to do aggressively by running away like the Akula and the Hunter. Unfortunately, if the Mark II gets close and it shoots the missile near the hitbox, it's going to blow up. Next chopper up to bat is the Valkyrie. Oh boy, this one actually really surprised me and shocked me on how just good it was against the Oppressor Mk2. So generally, this one has to adopt the Akula strategy where it's using the top speed method to outrun the homing missiles. As you can see, this thing is really fucking fast. And because of that, it can actually act just like the Akula with no real worry. And basically, the consistency here is basically you're trying to waste all of the missiles so that when the broomstick runs out of missiles, you can chase them down with the cannon of the Valkyrie. You can also be aggressive, as you can see right here. We're hovering above him, we're trying to use the cannon, but the problem is with the camera for this cannon is that it has a low sensitivity, so it's not very effective at hitting those precise shots when you actually need it. It's better for when you waste all the missiles, as you can see, and then we're chasing him down with the Valkyrie with that same cannon. Once he attempts to land, that's when you actually want to try and kill him. And as you're going to see here, he's going to try and land on the opposite side of the airstrip. He's going to land, Green's going to hit him with the cannon, and he's going to kill him. And we didn't blow up the actual Oppressor for the test reasons, but I can tell you right now, if this was an enemy player in an actual free roam war, I would have had Green blow up the Mark II afterward to force the 5-minute cooldown. So the Valkyrie is 100% a good counter against the actual Oppressor Mark II. It actually shocked me. This is actually only one of 3 clips, and all 3 of them decimated the Mark II. So I only showed off one here, but generally the consensus is that the Valkyrie didn't lose once. The last chopper that we have to cover is the Savage, and this is kind of self-explanatory why I left this one last, is because this one is terrible. As you can see, this is the non-speed increase, non-hanger version from Pegasus that I called in, and yeah, it's not gonna last long. In fact, it's gonna die here pretty freaking quickly, and I couldn't even get like 3 missiles to chase him. And this is a chopper with homing missiles. We've established throughout this whole video that if you're a chopper with missiles, you have a larger chance of actually killing a Mark II than one that doesn't. and still this thing is just not effective. And not to mention the cannon, because of its slow handling, it can't turn around very fast, and it's short range. It's just not an effective chopper. As we see here, we just completely gave up on this test and I fixed it. And then this is the speed increase while I'm running away. And this one, it's actually effective, but the problem is the weaponry of the actual chopper and what it's meant for. This is not a chopper that's meant to do this. Because of its weaponry, it's kind of embarrassing that a Savage has to even do this in the first place. So yeah, I got a kill on him, but there's no excuse for this. This chopper is not designed for killing broomsticks. Period. And now finally at the end, we're going to talk about the individual helicopter counters and which ones are the best and which one are the absolute worst. The one at the top of each tier is the absolute best or worst one in the bad category, and the one at the bottom is the best of the bad or the worst of the best. So in bad, we're going to start off with the bad stuff automatically. The Savage is absolutely terrible against the Mark II. As you can see in the gameplay, it just kept hitting the missile pods where you launch the homing missiles, and the thing just lacks the agility. The only way you can kill a Mark II with this thing, as you saw, was using the speed increase. And I'm sorry, but being forced to use a speed increase just to be able to kill a flying bike, especially considering the Savage's weaponry, is kind of pathetic. And the Annihilator stealth, kind of same thing here, but it has no homing missiles. So this one, you know, it can do the speed increase method, and it can dodge Oppressor Mk2 rockets. I've done it before and survived. But it can't really kill a Mark II because a Mark II turns too fast, so if it's constantly surrounding the thing, the barrage missiles are going to be a pain in the ass to fucking aim. The machine guns don't do much, so you only have the fucking helicopter blades, which at least the Annihilator stealth has its helicopter blades. The Savage couldn't even hope to kill a thing with the helicopter blades. And the same thing with the normal Annihilator. The only way you're going to kill a Mark II with this thing is dodge all its missiles in third person, using its low hit box, and try to run it over with your helicopter blades. That's really the only thing you can do. Other than that, the Annihilator is more of a defensive helicopter because all the missiles just miss and go underneath of it. And going into the mid or meh helicopters, at the very bottom, just above the Annihilator in the bad, is the Havok. This is just a smaller Annihilator without the hitbox and countermeasures. As you can see, it actually did kill the Mark II when the Mark II was forced to land one time in one of the test clips, and I actually did kill Simon on the ground. But, you know, again, it's more of try to hit the Mark II with your propellers, and that's not really that effective, so again, more of a defensive thing. Now, this is an interesting one, the Thruster. This is another chopper that's similar to the Annihilator, but for completely different reasons. It's because of that weird hitbox when you're running away from missiles. For some reason, any missile that is smaller than a Hunter missile model or a Chernobog model instantly blows up behind the thruster, not destroying the aircraft or the pilot. And because of that fact, the thruster is automatically immune and is probably the best one out of all of these to do the speed increase method because there's no risk to you. even if you fuck up the speed, it's just gonna blow up behind you. But it's not good at aggressive approaches. And what I mean by that is that all those fights where it's trying to hover above the Mark II, it's trying to shoot missiles at it, and not moving in a straight line, the thruster's not good for that, and that's because the hitbox, for that exact reason, when the missiles hit it at certain angles, it actually blows up right next to the pilot, and sometimes it'll clip through the aircraft and kill the pilot, but not the aircraft, which is kind of the problem. And it's just, the camera is the other problem. It's just not designed for that, you know, like, the stupid camera is just constantly shaking about. You have to use first person, and it's just not responsive. And the one above it, even though I did not test it in this video, I absolutely know for a fact that it can beat a Mark II, is the Annihilator Stealth with homing. Just as I'm about to go over in a similar vehicle in the best category, this thing can beat it. It's just that I don't own Annihilator Stealth with homing missiles, and I'm not going to buy it just for this video. But I have seen plenty of Annihilator Stealths using the speed increase method, using the aggressive method, and killing Mark IIs. I've seen it before. It is a thing. And at the top of mid or meh is the Akula Barrage. The Akula Barrage, basically it has all the perks of the Akula homing in the best category, as you can see. But it doesn't have the homing missiles. It doesn't have a way to lock on to a target and be automatically able to track it. You have to completely free aim this whole thing. Meaning that if the Mark II wastes all its missiles on you and starts flying away, the barrage is completely useless to you. So at that point, you just have to run it over with either your propellers trying to chase after it, or you have to wait for the thing to bloody land. Which, you know, that's not bad, but at the same time, wouldn't you rather destroy it in the air? You know? And plus, barrage helicopters like the Akula and the Annihilator Stealth with barrage are just not designed for fucking Mark IIs. Same with the Savage, same with all these other ones beneath it. They're just not designed to fight Mark IIs. And finally, moving on to the best category. This is where this gets interesting. The Sparrow is at the very bottom of the best category. And here's why. Okay? Here's why. The Sparrow is terrible at lining up shots sometimes with its homing missiles. And because of that fact, it just can't hit Mark IIs all the time. But it has the chaff, it has the ability to do the speed increase through its submarine. It can even do the speed increase top speed method without even having the glitch active. So that is a good thing. But as you saw in the gameplay, like with the Annihilator Stealth and the Havok and this thing, when they were doing the speed increase, all three of those choppers have this weird fucking bug where if you're clicking on RB or LB for too long, the entire aircraft turns itself around and shoots itself upward, completely killing all of your momentum. And I really don't like that about those three choppers, which is why you don't see me using them very often. Now, these next four ones, two of them here really surprised me. The first one is the Buzzard. Holy fuck, the Buzzard surprised me. The Buzzard I think the Buzzard, even though it's like number 4 on the best list here, it has the highest kill count out of all of these for the helicopters. It's just that good. And as you could see, I was using the CEO Buzzard because it was a black Buzzard. That's the CEO one. Without speed increase, nothing. It's just a vanilla Buzzard. And I was just completely destroying them. And as you also saw, with the speed increase one from the hangar, I was dodging probably 10 missiles from Simon behind me in his broomstick. So, it's a very effective chopper. I've killed so many Mark IIs with this thing, but I didn't understand just how good it was until I actually put it to the test. Now, the Akula homing, This one's kind of self-explanatory. This one, you probably have the less risk of dying out of all of them, even more than the thruster. And the reason is because the Akula is so fucking fast that it doesn't need chaff. Like, when you have speed increase on this thing, it is fast or as fast as a Hydra going at top speed. So, like, you don't need to use chaff. Where the Hunter's a little bit slower, but it's still as fast as a Hydra, the Akula is so fast to the point that you don't need the countermeasures. Literally, in that clip, the one clip that I only showed, I ran straight at him, I shot homing missiles at him, and he couldn't turn around fast enough to shoot missiles at me to kill me. And then I did it again, and my missiles connected and I killed him. That's how fast this thing is. And then, the Valkyrie. This is another one that fucking just blew my mind. The Valkyrie, for some inconspicuous reason, just destroys the Mark II. And honestly, when I was flying the Valkyrie with the speed increase, it felt like an Akula. It honestly did. And as you can see, I was using the top speed method and the aggressive hover method, both in the same Valkyrie clip. The only problem with the aggressive method is that, as you could see, Green couldn't shoot at me with the cannons because the cannon's camera has piss poor sensitivity. It can't aim that fast, so it takes fucking forever. So that is a problem. But as you could also see, when I was doing the top speed method and then we wasted all his missiles, all we had to do was literally turn around, chase after him, wait for him to try and land, and then Green just knocked him off his bike and killed him. He didn't blow up the bike for the test reasons, but I can tell you for a fact, after he blew up Green, or Simon, I mean, after he blew up Simon, he would have blew up the bike. And that's the key with all of these. The key is to blow up the bike. If you blow up the bike, they have to wait 5 minutes, meaning that they get some personal sweet time with your chopper. And the Hunter, this one's self-explanatory, man. Like, do I really have to explain why the fucking Hunter is the best one? It's basically better than all of these because it has everything that all of these choppers have, besides normal machine guns. It has barrage missiles for free aim when the Mark II's in front of it. It has the homing missiles that are super effective, as you could see in the Akula gameplay. And I've actually connected lots of kills with that homing missile system on that chopper. It has the bombs for ground targets. It has countermeasures. It has 3 missile armor. And more importantly, the Hunter shares the same cannon as the fucking Valkyrie. So that means that it literally has everything that every chopper on this list has, but it has so much of it to the point that it's just automatically superior. Like, if there was one chopper that I would say you need to buy, it is the Buzzard and the Hunter. These two are mandatory. The Akula homing, you can kind of skip. The Sparrow, you'll have to get if you grind this game a lot. And the Valkyrie, that one's completely optional. But all the ones in the best are all the best ones with speed increase or without. These are the best ones, period. They're just too good. And yes, you heard me right, the Valkyrie without speed increase can even beat the Mark II, so that's saying a lot. So, these are the helicopter counters, and I think that's enough said about the helicopters. Now we're going to move on to the fighter jets, and then we're going to move on to the ground vehicles. The first jet up to bat in the fighter jet category is the B-11 Strikeforce. This fighter jet, it has the most armor out of any aircraft. It has barrage missiles, homing missiles, an explosive cannon, bombs, countermeasures, and it also has to be extremely high, at least above the Maze Bank Tower roof, in order to be able to go fast and outrun the missiles. If it's close to the ground, it's not going to be able to do what you're seeing in the gameplay. it needs to be at least above Maze Bank Tower or a little bit higher like in this clip in order to be able to go at top speed, hold LB or RB for a few seconds, and then switch to the other. As you can see here, I'm holding LB and all the missiles are completely missing or not even catching me at all. But you have to be at this height or a little bit lower, but you at least have to be above Maze Bank Tower. And because of the variety of weapons that this plane has, you can dive underneath it like a lot of other explosive cannon jets. You can use the homing missiles. You can also have countermeasures to help the splice of attacking even more. You can have barrage missiles, the homing missiles. It's just, this jet has so many different ways of attacking the Mark II, but it does require the height advantage in order to get the speed. So just know that if a Mark II catches you at low altitude while you're trying to bomb a target, it's probably going to kill you. Even if you're doing a Hydra circle, you can't outrun these missiles, so it's very important that you're high in the air. But as you can see here, I managed to waste all his missiles. I destroyed the bike, but he ended up dying, which means we basically won this engagement. And here in test 2, this is at 4 times speed. The reason why I'm also showing another test is because this is what can happen if you're facing a good Mark II pilot like Green in this instance. So even though the jet can actually waste a lot of its missiles at high altitude and completely be able to ruin the Mark II in terms of wasting missiles, it has a hard time actually hitting a good pilot on this thing. As you can see, I'm using the cannons, I'm using the homing missiles, I'm using the barrage, I'm using countermeasures, I'm using all the 9 yards, and this thing is having a hard time hitting a good pilot like Green, for example. And not to mention the fact that because he constantly keeps changing height, it's hard for me to tell exactly where he is half the time. So eventually I just ended up quitting this clip because it was just taking too long. But generally it can counter it. It's just that because the cannon shoots slower than a lot of other cannons, you're going to have a hard time connecting a shot. But if you do make a shot, it'll blow up. And the homing missiles, as I'm about to go over with the other jets, if you get a good angle, you'll be able to kill them easily. Barrage missiles, they're kind of up in the air. You can use them if you want, but they're probably not going to hit. And basically, the consensus of this jet is just to waste its missiles, because otherwise it's just going to have a hard time trying to kill it otherwise. The biggest reason why you see me not using homing missiles is because of the fact that it has limited homing missiles up to 30. Which is why you're not seeing me using homing missiles as much. Moving on to the next jet is the V-65 Molotok. This jet is generally similar to the next 2 planes on this list, but generally this one is pretty fast at top speed and shares the same acceleration as the Lazer, but it has a hard time actually turning and getting close to the Mark II and staying behind it. So you'll notice that within a lot of these clips, or a lot of these attempts to kill the Mark II, I should say, that I have a hard time actually staying behind him and actually noticing where he is, because this thing isn't very agile. But then again, any dogfighting guru would already know that, because this is like the worst jet in terms of maneuverability, which is why I have such a hard time being able to actually keep an eye on where he is, because it just doesn't turn very well. But as you can see, it can easily do the top speed method. It can use the countermeasures to be aggressive when going at it. It has very fast missiles. That's actually one thing that a lot of people don't talk about on the Molotok. Its missiles launch the fastest out of all the fighter jets, but I think that was because of the balancing factor. Rockstar had to make it appealing somehow to players. And also this one, it also has a large amount of control. So if you actually pull out the wheels, it actually has control even if you turn off the engine, which is a very unique feature. So if I did completely stall the aircraft, I probably could have got behind him, but it's just a really difficult plane to keep tracking the Mark II because it just lacks maneuverability. It can kill a Mark II, but it'll take a very long time if he's someone like Green that knows what they're doing. The next plane is the P-45 Nokota. This is very similar to the Molotok once again. However, it does have a unique feature with its missile pods. It has to launch 3 homing missiles from one wing in order to start shooting from the other wing, which is a pretty unique feature and very useful when bombing targets. But in terms of actually shooting down Mark IIs, it's okay, but it's not really going to be that helpful when fighting a Mark II. Generally, again, just like with the Molotok, you have to get behind it and spam shitloads of missiles and attempt to waste his missiles while he's chasing after you. But generally, as soon as he wastes all his missiles, this one actually had an easier time taking him down, because of the fact that this one actually has a large portion better maneuverability than the Molotok ever had, so it made it very easy to track this thing down, so it wasn't that difficult. The next jet up to bat is the Pyro. Again, this is similar to the Nokota and the Molotok, but this one has the best agility out of all of them. And in this one, I'm going to be able to fully explain what you need to do in order to spam missiles with all 3 of these aircraft, as I can better explain it in this one. First off, the Pyro just has so much maneuverability that it can literally just constantly turn in place by holding LB or RB and just doing a constant straight circle like this and wasting all the missiles. Then you can just stay behind it, and because it turns so fast, you can stay right behind the broomstick the whole damn time. Basically, the consensus is that you want to get behind it while it's trying to turn, as you saw in the Nokota clip when I just killed him, or you want to stay behind him at a distance and completely stall your plane out and keep spamming missiles. The key here is to spam so many missiles that the alert system on his bike is overridden and makes it extremely difficult for him to tell which missile is the threat and which missile isn't the threat. Because of this, he's never going to be able to be confident on if he's actually safe or not. And eventually, I do end up getting him. The next plane up to bat is an interesting one, the LF-22 Starling. This one has a slightly different way on how to attack a Mark II, but if you really think about it, it's just in a different direction. So how do I explain this? Basically, you want to keep going up and down and then going side to side with your rudders or elevators. Similar to how you would run away from a Mark II using the top speed method with the other jets, but you're more taking control of the elevators instead, and constantly going up and down while trying to go down or up in altitude. And then when you run out of the boost, you want to go extremely high so you have enough time, hold RT, and slightly tap LT once in a while, and as you can see, the yellow bar where my map is filling up a large portion faster. This is your fuel for your boost. If it's full, it means you're safe for a while from missiles. But if it starts emptying, you need to start gaining altitude, because if you run out, he's going to be able to kill you quite easily. And as long as you boost when he shoots a missile at you, even if it's like super close at the start of the clip that I showed, I was able to escape the missile. So this one you can be a lot more aggressive on even getting close to close missiles. And because of this, you can even use the non-explosive cannons to try and shoot him off. Or if you get him at a good angle, you can spam missiles. And then once he wastes all his missiles, because this jet has the best control over its speed because it has the boost system, it can completely slow down to a snail's pace or go as fast as a goddamn cheetah running across the savannah. Meaning that it has complete control over the Mark II's movements. It can get behind it within an instant. And because of the same method with the Pyro and the other jets of spamming missiles constantly, it can never be truly confident on being safe. And eventually, you will end up hitting him. And now finally, the last jet that I was able to get gameplay for is the P996 Lazer. This one's pretty self-explanatory. Also, this jet was the fastest out of all the tested jets. This is kind of self-explanatory. It's because of the cannon. Because you can dive bomb it constantly and you can do the top speed method. Basically, the synopsis is that when he has missiles chasing after you, you do the top speed method by either combining the elevators by going in a knife flight if they're close, or if they're far away, using the rudders with LB and RB. And then once you get out of his range, you want to dive bomb him, and then go underneath him, and then do an uppercut attack with the cannons as well. Do this constantly, repeatedly, over and over, and eventually the cannons will connect, or he'll run out of missiles. If he runs out of missiles, then he's truly in for it. But as you can see, I was able to connect a cannon shot pretty fast here. Now I'm going to be going over the statistics of the fighter jets. First off, while I let you guys read the image in front of your screen, I'm going to go over the 2 aircraft that I didn't include in this. Also the Sea Breeze, because I forgot about that one. I did not include the Sea Breeze because of the fact that it lacks any homing missiles or any explosive weaponry that isn't bombs. And generally because I play on console, and the fact that the machine guns do not have tracers, it makes it a really hard time to be able to do that. And hitting propellers, especially with a plane, is not going to be consistent. You can't rely on hitting a Mark II with a propeller every time on a Sea Breeze. And then the Rogue and the Hydra. The Hydra I didn't include because it's pretty self-explanatory. It's very similar to the Lazer. It's just a lot more bulky and has less acceleration. But generally, the cannon is just as effective as on the Lazer as with the Hydra, so there's really not much difference in terms of weaponry and the ability to counter it. And the Rogue mainly because I don't own this plane for one, and I just don't think that this thing is actually a good plane. I have killed Mark IIs with it in the past with the missiles and the cannons, but generally this thing's just a pain in the ass to goddamn aim because the cannons are just so annoying to aim. This thing experiences the most amount of turbulence, and it's just a pain. It's just an absolute pain. Now, as for the other jets, all these fighter jets that I've shown, and even the Rogue and the Hydra, all of them individually are all good against the Oppressor Mk2, except for 2 exceptions, as you can see. The B11 and the Sea Breeze. The Sea Breeze I've already went over, but the B11, this is one I want to talk about. So, the B11, as I said before, it needs altitude in order to be able to counter a Mark II. Without the altitude increase above Maze Bank Tower, it does not have the speed to be able to outrun missiles. Because of this, if a Mark II catches you at low altitude, it is an ineffective plane. It has the weaponry to beat it, but it needs that altitude. Without the altitude, it's completely helpless. As for all these other aircrafts, including the Hydra and the Rogue, and the ones that I've showed in this section, all of them, even the B11 at high altitude, have the ability to complete and kill the Mark II. So really, this is more of a subjective thing. And the reason why I say that is because it's less about the planes themselves, because as I said before, besides the Sea Breeze, all of these planes have the ability to kill one. It's more down to, does the pilot actually have the skill to be able to pull off the techniques that I was showing and be able to fly it correctly? That's the main thing that you have to more think about. So in my opinion, it's more dependent on pilot skill than the performance of the aircrafts, as you can clearly see. If a terrible aircraft pilot was in any of these planes, he probably wouldn't have beat the Mark II in any of these tests. But as you can see, I'm an experienced pilot, and I was able to beat the Mark II in almost all of these jets. So again, it's not subjective in terms of the performance of the aircrafts. It's more subjective on the pilot skill individually as people. We can't really just say, oh, one jet is bad because one person doesn't handle it very well, but then another person handles it very well, and then it's automatically the best thing. It depends on the pilot. So for this reason, I didn't make a tier list for any of these jets because theoretically speaking, all of them work. All of them can counter the Mark II, as you clearly saw. All of them can do the top speed method. All of them can do the aggressive method, especially with the lower tracking of the Mark II missiles. So really, all of them can do this. The only one that can't is the Sea Breeze because it doesn't have any explosive weapons. But I have heard cases of people being able to hit it with the propellers. So if you can hit it consistently with the propellers on the Sea Breeze, I guess you could count that on that list too. Which means that all the weaponized planes in this game are hard counters against the Mark II. Because none of these fucking missiles are going to catch them. Unless if you happen to be a B-11 at low altitude. But generally, as I said before, all of these fighter jets, all of these attack planes have the ability to kill Mark IIs, and it's skill subjective, not on the performance of the aircrafts. Now we're going to move on to the ground vehicles and then the hybrid counters or hybrid vehicles. The first vehicle among the armored vehicles along with a Molotok is the Ocelot Virtue. The first three vehicles we're going to start off with are the Molotok vehicles. The first one is the Virtue, the recently released car out of all the Molotok vehicles. This is easily the fastest in terms of acceleration and the easiest to use by far. One thing that I should mention is that if you complete all 5 of the first dose missions and all 5 of the last dose missions, you should be able to get this car for free once you get back to free mode after the last mission. This makes it extremely useful and extremely available for players because it's completely free, and it's technically the best out of the 3 vehicles that I'm going to be showcasing in today's video. All Molotok vehicles with the missile lock-on jammer are complete hard counters to the missiles because if the missiles cannot lock onto it, therefore the tracking does not work and it has to free aim it. And because these things take multiple rockets, at least over 10 homing missiles, and how fast this one is especially, the chances of this thing actually getting hit by a Mark II is very slim. Up next is the Patriot Mil-spec. Coming up next is the Patriot Mil-spec. This is definitely the most unique Molotok vehicle out of all of them, and it is because of its bed cap, but that's more for other types of combat. The real reason why this is so useful is because of the fact that, well, it's not as fast as the Virtue say, but it adds more protection. So if you're trying to run away from someone in a Mark II, and they're trying to, instead of actually trying to kill you on the Mark II, like get right in front of you or try to shoot you with a gun, the bed cap on the back, as you can see on mine, actually deflects all bullets and enemy fire, so it's definitely the most protective. And also, because of the fact that it is actually very good at maneuverability and not speed, it actually can outmaneuver a lot of Mark IIs. This is definitely my panic vehicle in free mode when I can't get another vehicle in time, so if I would have to say one vehicle you need to put in your MOC to store it, it would definitely be this one, because this one has the most protection out of all of them. And same thing with all the other Molotok vehicles. It has all the other advantages. It has the missile lock-on jammer, it has shitloads of armor, and all the other things that can make it useful against a broomstick. So really, there's no chance of one actually killing you in this thing. The last of the Molotok vehicles that I will show examples of is the Buffalo STX. And lastly, out of all the Molotok vehicles I will be showing in this video, the Buffalo STX, the most used Molotok vehicle in the entire game. Why is this the one the most used? Because this is easily the most affordable, it's the cheapest, and it has 4 doors, so you can have 4 people using sticky bombs to kill Mark IIs with it. And it's actually pretty decently fast, as you can see. It's not like fast like the Virtue, but it's fast enough to the point that it can actually like outmaneuver Mark IIs a large portion of the time. But the real reason why it's here, and I think it's a little bit better than the Virtue in some instances, is because it has those armored windows. The Virtue and the Omnis EGT, both electric cars in the Ammonitech class, don't have bullet-resistant windows, and having more protection inside these vehicles is extremely key when dealing with other types of enemies while trying to take down a Mark II. So more protection is always good. But generally, it does the same thing that all these other Ammonitech vehicles can do. It just shoot sticky bombs at it when it's flying towards you. And because the thing can't lock on, it's basically just wasting its missiles. Up next, we have the 3 normal armored cars. First up, the Nightshark. Up next is my personal favorite, the Nightshark, aka the best counter against Oppressor Mk2s in free mode because of how much armor it has and the fact that it can sticky bomb Mark IIs and all that other stuff. The only thing that this thing does not have is a Monitech, but considering that this thing has shitloads of armor, basically it takes like 27 homing rockets to be able to blow up, meaning that because a Mark II only carries 20, a Mark II on its own against a Nightshark in a 1v1 scenario can never win against a Nightshark. That's right, it'll never win. That means that by them attacking you, they actually damnate themselves by risking getting hit by one of your sticky bombs. So it's a win-win scenario for you, it's a lose-lose scenario for them. This is why I consider this is the best counter against the Oppressor Mk2, because it's not like the Ammonitech vehicles where it basically just gets them to go away because they're not even going to bother trying. At least a large portion of free mode Oppressor Mk2 users won't even bother. They'll probably give up within like the first few missiles if they can't lock onto you. But the Nightshark, because it can actually get locked onto by broomsticks, it actually gives them the false sense of security that maybe that they can actually kill you. When in all reality, if you actually drive this vehicle on a regular basis, you would know that you are completely safe in this thing. And basically, you just have to bide your time. Either have him waste all his missiles and have him fly away and then repair your Nightshark, or he risks getting hit by your sticky bomb and he has to wait the 5-minute cooldown. It's a lose-lose for them. The next armored vehicle to showcase is the half-track. Next up is the half-track. You may be questioning why I picked the half-track out of all of them. Well, the simple reason is because it also has a machine gun and it can toss the sticky bombs twice as far, just like the Nightshark and other sorts of vehicles in its class. And the biggest reason is because, well, this thing's immune to both explosives and bullets because of its impervious windshield that for some reason just doesn't break even if FMJ rounds hit it. So this one is by far like the safest one to use against all kinds of different types of enemies. But the biggest thing is it trying to beat Mark IIs. Because it has the same armor as the Nightshark, but it's slower, it can actually aim its sticky bombs a lot more effectively. And because of that, and the fact that you're always going to see the Mark II more often because it's slower, it gives you more chances to line up your sticky bomb. You can also put the pilot in more pressure by dealing with your machine gunner, or another sticky bomb user inside the passenger seat, or have the passenger use flare guns to divert or even waste more missiles. So this thing is definitely a hard counter as well. It's just that it's extremely slow, and I would not recommend using this against multiple Mark IIs, unlike the Nightshark, but this one can do the job. It's just that this one is less fast. And then finally, the last of the armored vehicles is the Civi Insurgent. Next vehicle on the list is the Civi Insurgent. This is by far the cheapest option out of all the armored vehicles without a Monitech. This one's only like, I believe, $600,000 or $800,000 if you haven't done the heist. So this is easily the most affordable, even more affordable than the Nightshark, I would say. And as you can see here, even though it's slightly bigger than the Nightshark, it doesn't really affect it all that much in terms of performance against the Mark II missiles, or its ability to throw sticky bombs at it. I do believe, however, that this one takes a slight bit less amount of rockets. I haven't actually tested this, but I have heard it from cases of people that actually do own it. So keep this in mind. But it generally can do everything that the Nightshark can do, it's just a little bit bigger. So just keep that in mind. And the only service vehicle that will be mentioned in this video, the MOC cab. The next one is a big chunky boy. This one is the MOC cab. This one easily, out of all of them, takes the most amount of rockets besides maybe the Acid Lab. But the reason I'm putting the MOC here is mainly because of the fact that this is just a better option, because the Acid Lab likes to bounce around a lot, and this one's a lot more sturdy. The basic counter with this one is basically, it's just meant to waste all of their missiles. Whether that hits it or not, you're completely safe. The amount of Mark IIs that would be having to shoot at you would it be at least over 4, because it needs 76 rockets to connect with the truck in order to blow up. And if you do the math, that's around 3 to 4 Mark IIs. And if you're in a one-on-one engagement, there's absolutely no chance of him killing you. And if he tries to land next to you, just sticky bomb him like I do in the gameplay, and you've basically just won. First up, out of the normal vehicles without armor or special weapons, is the Phaggio Mod. The first of the normal vehicles that we're going to be going into, yes, I know it's a meme, is the Phaggio Mod. The reason why is because I just want to demonstrate once again how terrible the actual missiles are, and generally speaking, this is actually no longer a meme. You can actually turn the Phaggio into an actual pretty deadly counter, especially considering that it's a very small bike. And the Mark II, as you're going to see in these later tests with 2 other bikes, the Mark II has a hard time hitting a lot of motorcycles. So this is no longer a meme. This is actually a counter now. You can beat Mark IIs on a Phaggio, and it makes it look really easy. In fact, it actually is this easy. It's just literally just turn around, drive towards the missiles. They miss all the time, and then just rinse and repeat this until either your sticky bombs hit or he just runs out of missiles. That's literally it. This is no longer a meme. This is actually a counter now. In the second test, I have on my POV me using an Oppressor Mk2 on Green on his Phaggio. One thing to keep in mind is that me and Green, when we were both using the Oppressor Mk2, we actually know how to fly this thing upside down. We know how to time the chaff, and we actually know how to angle the missiles correctly on certain targets. And as we can see here, even I'm struggling to hit him with the homing rockets, and I had to use free aim for the first portion of this clip because I just didn't want to rely on homing missiles that I knew were just going to miss anyways. And because of that, as you can probably notice, I'm flying a lot lower than I usually would, and that's because I have to use the free aim rockets. And this is actually opening me up to one of his sticky bombs so then he can kill me. So if anything, this is actually not a meme anymore. The Phaggio can actually 100% beat a Mark II based off of this footage alone. It's no longer just, oh, any Chad in the game can beat a Oppressor Mk2 before the nerf. You know, it's actually a thing now. You can actually use this scooter to beat a flying bike. As ridiculous as that sounds, but it's actually the truth. Next up of the normal vehicles is the Powersurge, the only electric bike in the game. The next normal vehicle is another bike, the Powersurge, the one and only electric motorcycle in the game. This one even embarrasses the Mark II even more than the Phaggio did, because this one, it accelerates so damn quickly towards the Mark II that it actually can throw sticky bombs a lot farther than some other vehicles, even because of how fast it actually can accelerate to top speed. Because of this, it also turns around really fast, so if the Mark II gets behind it and the thing starts suddenly turning, all missiles behind the bike will completely miss. It's one of those rare few vehicles that actually you wouldn't think would be able to beat a flying bike, but it actually can. And because of this, all you literally need to do is just adopt the method of constantly turn towards the missiles, even if the Mark II is completely behind you. As long as you do that, this bike and the other two vehicles and the Phaggio should be able to easily be able to do this. And as you can see, every time you face the missiles, they're always missing. It's only when you're running away from a missile that it's actually going to be able to hit you. So, biggest tip and advice I could give you if you're using a normal car or even a bike, if a Mark II comes after you, don't run away from it. Always engage it, always face towards it. Because of this and the piss poor tracking on this thing's missiles now, it's never going to hit a head-on target that's coming straight at it. You always want to face the missiles, you always want to face the bike, and as long as you do that for 20 missiles straight, if you can never hit him, he should never be able to kill you. And if you do kill him, good job. The third vehicle out of the normal vehicles is the Death Bike. Yes, I'm aware that this is an arena war vehicle, but you die in one missile anyways. The next vehicle, even though it's technically not a normal car, you still die from one rocket, is the Arena War Apocalypse Bike. This Death Bike is basically the best bike out of all of them because it actually has a very unique feature that makes sticky bombing this thing at high altitudes extremely useful. The one useful feature is the jump. Because it has a jump feature, it can actually aim and throw sticky bombs at higher degrees of angles because of that. And it also has a boost, and because it's a bike as well, it's extremely small, so even if a missile's like turning behind you, as long as you persist the turn, it's going to miss. And as you could see there, even a missile was falling behind me. It completely passed me to the right. If it went any further to the left, it would have hit me. And the boost actually is the biggest reason why this thing is so useful. Combine the boost along with its jump and its ability to throw sticky bombs twice as high, even higher than a Nightshark in most cases. This is an extremely deadly vehicle to use against Mark IIs. For this reason, I would highly recommend getting this one, just because of the fact that it's so damn useful, and it's extremely fast. Like, this is probably the fastest ground vehicle with its Nitros boost. And finally, the last out of the normal vehicles is the Coquette D10. Do keep in mind, if you use bigger cars, it's going to have a harder time dodging missiles. And the last out of the normal vehicles is my Coquette D10 sports car. This is the best example for normal cars if you're trapped in a normal car in free mode. Basically, the consensus here is you constantly want to face the Mark II when he's shooting missiles at you and attempt to sticky bomb him. As long as you do that, you'll be fine. And in Test 2, we decided to go into a more condensed area full with objects, so then the vehicle in question is a lot more restricted in terms of its movement. And still, the car came out on top because of the fact that as long as you do what I tell you to do, and constantly face the Mark II when it's shooting missiles at you, and drive towards the bike, or the missiles in question, the missiles will never hit. Even if they launch pretty high above you, as you can see they're completely shooting down towards the road. They'll completely miss. In fact, actually going into a building-like area like downtown is actually proving to be more detrimental towards the bike, because now it has a bunch of objects blocking its lock-on, and as long as the car takes cover, this is actually more problematic for the bike than the actual car, because the car can actually controls the amount of time that the Mark II can lock onto it for, and because of this you'll eventually get him. So normal cars, as long as you're facing him, you'll be fine. Starting out first with the special vehicles and the hybrid counters is the Toreador. First out of the special cars are the hybrid counters. We have the Toreador. This one can easily counter the Mark II because it has a boost. It has a similar armor system to the actual Stromberg, and it has infinite Stromberg missiles, which basically are the second highest top tier tracking missiles in the entire game, but it has infinite amounts of them, so you never have to worry about actually running out of missiles. And because it has armor, you don't even have to use the boost. You just literally just go towards him, have all of his missiles miss, and then you can turn around and then kill him afterwards. You don't even need to shoot a missile at him during the initial pass when you're going straight at him. That's how easily you can counter him, and because of this fact, he has to waste shitloads of missiles to be able to kill you. The next special vehicle is the Vigilante. The next vehicle up to bat is the Vigilante. I bet anyone here watching this video never thought that the Vigilante would be on this list, but yes, it can actually counter it despite it having no armor. So if this thing gets hit by a missile, it will not survive, but as we've already discussed with the normal cars, as long as this thing turns around after a Mark II gets behind it and shoots missiles at it, it should be completely fine. And because it also has a boost similar to the Toreador, it can actually easily recover from losing all of its speed during a turnaround, especially because this thing's very top heavy. And this thing also has the highest tracking missiles, the Ruiner missiles, attached to its bumper, so if this thing gets a lock on the Mark II, the Mark II's definitely not surviving. Do keep in mind that this one actually has the slowest fire rate out of all of the missile cars. This is at least at 90 RPM or at 120 RPM. I can't remember exactly, but it is very slower than a lot of these other ones. So keep that in mind. If you notice that you can't shoot a second missile, it's because it has to cool down for longer. The next special vehicle is the Scramjet. The next vehicle up to bat is the Scramjet with my friend Green inside, and I'm on the Oppressor Mk2 and you're seeing my PVO. As you can clearly see, he's able to dodge my rockets, but if I was to lock onto him here and my game didn't bug out, I would have definitely killed him, but he locked onto me with his Ruiner rocket and got a kill on me. In this next engagement, I go at him in my Scramjet, he comes at me in his Oppressor Mk2. We do the first exchange without me actually locking on to demonstrate the crappy tracking once again of the missiles, and then I attempt to do a turnaround with a boost and lock onto him with the Ruiner rocket, and I get a kill here. In clip number 3, this is where I attempt to actually jump. And this is where you actually need to be careful, because if he pops the chaff before you jump, it's actually very ineffective to actually attempt to jump, because actually jumping is what leads you to actually making yourself wide open in the Scramjet. It's much better just to stick to the ground and just wait him out to get close to the ground and then shoot him with your missiles that way. The reason I did jump, however, was because I thought he was like way out in the distance, and I thought I could just easily sneak a missile in while he was at distance, and he didn't expect me to jump at him. But he was expecting this, and he did chaff, and because he chaffed, I wasn't really able to lock onto him, and then I completely passed him, and then he shot missiles at me and killed me. So be very careful when using the jump. A lot of the time, it will kill you. The next special vehicle is the fully loaded Ruiner from the fully loaded VIP work. We are not going to be covering the normal Ruiner that you get when you buy it. The next vehicle is the vehicle that completely counters the Mark II too much, to the point that it's so good that Mark II pilots will physically refuse to fight you. I'm talking about the fully loaded Ruiner. In order to get the fully loaded Ruiner, you have to purchase the Ruiner first, obviously, and then you have to go to your CEO menu and start the VIP job called Fully Loaded. From there, you have to go collect the vehicle, and then as long as you're inside the vehicle, it has these amount of perks. Infinite rockets, Ruiner style rockets with the highest tracking, and it has a Mani tech. Because of this fact, you're never going to actually be able to kill a Ruiner with a Mark II because it can't lock onto it, but it also has its own missile system that can lock onto you. Because of this, you can actually kill Mark II so effectively that Mark IIs will refuse fighting you, so it's actually kind of too good for its own good, and because of that, a lot of people will just not fight you. So only use this one if you're dealing with like shitloads of Mark IIs. The next special vehicle is the Oppressor Mk2, the related bike to the Oppressor Mk2. The next special vehicle is the Oppressor Mk1. This one is actually a bike, and this one is basically the sole counterpart to the Oppressor Mk2. Why can this one counter the Mark II and the Mark II cannot counter this one? Well, it's basically the same synopsis as all these other missile cars and the same ground vehicle strategy. Basically, you always want to be facing the Mark II when it's shooting missiles at you, and then go towards it like you would spam sticky bombs at it or shoot missiles at it from the missile cars. And then you want to shoot the missiles at height if they're really high in the air. As long as you do this, you can pretty much prevent them from being able to kill you as long as you stay grounded for most of the time, unless if they're super high in the air. And if they shoot missiles at you while you're flying at them, they should not be able to hit you. So again, this is a vehicle that can only be killed by the missiles if you're actually running away from the missiles. But as long as you turn around, as you can see, these missiles are coming behind me, and all I'm doing is just turning in the direction that they're coming from, and the missiles are just completely missing. So as long as you do that, you'll be completely fine, and eventually you will kill him. Do keep in mind the only time that he will be able to kill you, just like in the first clip, is if he lands and tries to shoot missiles at you while super close and leads them. That's the only way how he's truly going to be able to kill you. The first out of the two hybrid counters is the Chernobog. First, we'll showcase the normal version that you see in the clip, and then we'll showcase the fully loaded Chernobog from the prep mission for the Doomsday Heist. The next special vehicle or hybrid counter is the Chernobog. This one is more of a hybrid counter, if anything. It doesn't have any actual armor if you use the normal version of it, but it has extreme amount of high tracking, and it has a long range over 1,000 meters, so you'll be able to kill a Mark II before he can even get close to you. And as you can see with this brown version, this is the fully loaded Chernobog from the prep. you can actually use the prep version from the Doomsday Heist prep mission and actually use it as a weaponized vehicle. It has a Monitech just like the fully loaded Ruiner cousin of it, and it actually has armor, so it can actually take a few explosions as well, and it has all the other perks of the vehicle. So because of this, you can actually have access to 2 different ones, and the prep one is completely free. The second and last hybrid counter against the Oppressor Mk2 is the Marksman Rifle Mk2. This is specifically for auto aim, so this will not work for free aim. This next one is also a hybrid counter. This is the Marksman Rifle with the ACOG scope in auto aim, so it can lock on to players on the bike. This is easily the best one if you're on foot dealing with a Mk2 and auto aim. No Mk2 pellet, even if they're good, expects this. And with its good bullet velocity at 5,000, unlike ARs and combat MGs that are at 2,000, it actually can hit a Mk2 a large portion of the time, even at these farther shots. So it'll be able to kill a Mk2 very quickly, and because it's a sniper as well, it does that high damage, it does all that other stuff. And if you end up running into a favorite bike user, just use Bull Shark or Armor Pierce rounds. But do know that this does not work in free aim, it will only work in auto aim. However, if you do not have a Marksman Rifle Mk2 from the Weapon Workshop, you can also use a musket to be able to do this as well, but the musket is not as effective, and you can also use the Navy Revolver if you have that as well, if you don't have the Marksman Rifle. But I would recommend getting the Marksman Rifle Mk2 as soon as possible because it's the most consistent and easily the best one. And finally, the last special vehicle is the Deluxo. And the last vehicle is the Deluxo. Oh boy, we have to talk about the Deluxo. This thing this is like the epitome of just how bad the actual Mk2 missiles have become. So before the nerf, the missiles would completely destroy the Deluxo. As of now, in this current patch, and including the extra nerf they added to the missiles during the Drug Wars update, because they actually decreased the tracking even more for some unknown reason, the Deluxo just completely destroys this thing. I'm casually flying this thing around as if it's nobody's business, and I'm not even attempting to do any dodging techniques. I'm literally just flying around normally, and as you can see, I could just pop one Ruiner rocket from it and instantly kill him. And I'm not doing any dodging techniques whatsoever. Here in this second clip, I do the same thing for the first part of it, and then eventually you will see me attempt to do the dodging techniques. And because of this nerf, the dodging techniques are really kinda unnecessary, because the thing's missiles are just so blatantly terrible now that they constantly miss. And because they constantly miss, like look at this. I'm literally flying close to him. I'm being all willy-nilly. There's no urgency. There's no nothing. I'm not even taking this seriously, as you can clearly see. And he's doing everything in his power. And this is when I'm about to actually show off the dodging techniques. And the missiles, they still don't hit. We all knew that they weren't going to hit. But this is just proof that you don't need to do these dodging techniques. These are kind of more flashy maneuvers now, rather than actual necessary things. Here's the reverse backwards technique, going upwards, same thing, it's completely unnecessary. All the missiles are completely missing, and eventually I just kill him and end his suffering. Now we're going to be quickly going over all the special vehicles and the hybrid counters before we move on to the final verdict of the video. So, objectively speaking, all of the special vehicles and ground counters in this section that I showed off can counter a Mark II. However, some of these vehicles don't have missile armor or Amani tech. So like the Deluxo, the Vigilante, the Scramjet, those kinds of vehicles don't have armor. So in my opinion, they rely more on player skill and game knowledge. So for example, the Deluxo's dodging techniques, that kind of thing, or turning around towards the missile when you're getting shot from behind in a Vigilante, or staying grounded in a Scramjet so you don't get shot mid-air during a jump. Those are game knowledge and player skill oriented things. It's less to do with the performance. And all these other vehicles can all counter it. One thing to mention is that the fully loaded Ruiner and the fully loaded Chernobog, these ones are counters that you would only use in extreme situations because of the fact that they can't lock onto these things and they have shitloads of armor and they can shoot missiles back. So these are options that you would never use normally, because I can tell you right now, a lot of Mark II pilots, ever since this whole counter strategy became popular, people have just stopped fighting the Ruiner 2000 on Mark IIs altogether, because anyone that's in the know knows that a Mark II can't beat this thing, and it's just a waste of time. It takes like the same amount of rockets as a fucking Nightshark. It has the Amani Tech jammer. It has the most OP missiles in the game. It can jump. It can parachute. Like, there's so many things with that thing. And the Chernobog is the exact opposite of that thing. It has less armor, but it has the longest lock-on range out of all of the lock-on homing missile vehicles in the game. And it also has Amani Tech, so basically speaking, those two are complete counters through and through, because a Mark II that can't lock onto something cannot beat something. Just as with the normal Amani Tech vehicles. If the Mark II can't lock onto those vehicles, it can't kill it. It's just simple as that. One other thing is that although the Virtue is one of the Amani Tech vehicles I did show in this section, do keep in mind that I didn't have the armor plating from the actual custom shop, because for some fucking stupid reason, Rockstar is a half-developed company at this point that didn't realize that they added the same coating from the Acid Lab truck to the Virtue, so you can't throw sticky bombs out of it when you have the armor plating. So mine didn't have the armor plating, so it doesn't take near as many rockets. I think it only takes like 2 or 3. But you can only throw sticky bombs if you don't have that on, so keep that in mind. Hopefully in the next fucking update they'll change that. And as for the Nightshark, the half-track, and the Insurgent, and the MOC, these ones are complete counters in one-on-one engagements. I don't care what anyone says. A single Mark II against all 4 of these cannot win. It doesn't have enough missiles. Now, if you were to pit multiple Mark IIs, I would say the only ones that would be able to make it out are the Insurgent Civvy, the Nightshark, and the MOC. The reason why not the half-track was because I said before that it's super slow. It may be slow and it makes it easier to aim the sticky bombs, but the other reason is that it has less seats for people to use flare guns. So you have less chances of people using flares, which means you have more likely chances of missiles hitting you. And that's the other thing. The MOC has 5 seats, the Nightshark has 4, and the Insurgent has 6, where the half-track only has 2 passenger seats where passengers can use flares, the driver and the front passenger. So that's one thing to keep in mind. It may have a machine gun, but that machine gun is more to distract it from the actual threat. So do keep that in mind. So generally speaking, all of these ground vehicles are counters. All of them. It's just that some of them depend on player skill or game knowledge rather than the actual performance of the vehicles. And now for the final verdict on the video. So, what do I think? Is the Oppressor Mk2 actually as powerful as it used to be? Definitely not. I wasn't expecting near the amount of counters that I went over in the video, especially in terms of the helicopters and the ground vehicles. I knew most of the jets worked, but I was surprised to see half of the ground vehicles actually be able to counter it with no armor. And all the helicopters, like, all of them can dodge the missiles, besides the Savage, of course. But, you know, that's the part that was shocking me the most, is that a lot of them can actually dodge the rockets, but there's only really 5 that are actually worth it in that whole class. And generally, the other thing, the ground counter with the Marksman rifle, that's the only on-foot counter I ever actually added to this whole thing, because generally it's the best weapon to use against it, and if you have Bull Shark, you can easily 2-tap them. So, my verdict on the Oppressor Mk2, is it overpowered? Absolutely not. It's not even close to being overpowered anymore. I want you guys to think of this more as a $8 million fancier jetpack, in a way. It's not really what it used to be. You can still fly upside down with it and spawn trap targets on the ground, but as I went over with the Marksman rifle, you can easily just delete them with that thing. So the only thing this thing really has is being able to fly upside down, and because it doesn't have that tracking on those missiles anymore, flying upside down more is really redundant, and it's more of a defensive thing to run away from missiles. So my final verdict, the Oppressor Mk2 finally, after 5 years, is no longer overpowered, and these are the ways to counter it. But anyways, guys, that's going to be it for the video. If you guys could like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, share with your friends, and also check the eye on the top right of your screen so you don't miss out on future and past content on games like GTA and so on, that would be very much appreciated. Also, remember to leave a comment if you would like to see more episodes like this for the future for other vehicles in GT Online. So if you have a vehicle suggestion that you want me to actually go over and how to counter it in GTA 5 Online, then just leave it in the comment section down below, and I'll think about actually putting that one in the next episode. But anyways, guys, I am Tron Ninja, I'm signing out, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.